for supporting the body weight. The cross was not high, the Master's feet being only about 3 feet from the ground. He was, therefore, able to hear all that was said of him in derision, and could plainly see the expression on the faces of all those who so thoughtlessly mocked him. And also could those present easily hear all that Jesus said during these hours of lingering torture and slow death. It was the custom to remove all clothes from those who were to be crucified, but since the Jews greatly objected to the public exposure of the naked human form, the Romans always provided a suitable loincloth for all persons crucified at Jerusalem. Accordingly, after Jesus' clothes had been removed, he was thus garbed before he was put upon the cross. Crucifixion was resorted to in order to provide a cruel and lingering punishment, the victim sometimes not dying for several days. There was considerable sentiment against crucifixion in Jerusalem, and there existed a society of Jewish women who always sent a representative to crucifixions for the purpose of offering drugged wine to the victim in order to lessen his suffering. But when Jesus tasted this narcotized wine, as thirsty as he was, he refused to drink it. The Master chose to retain his human consciousness until the very end. He desired to meet death even in this cruel and inhuman form, and conquer it by voluntary submission to the full human experience. Before Jesus was put on his cross, the 2 brigands had already been placed on their crosses, all the while cursing and spitting upon their executioners. Jesus' only words, as they nailed him to the crossbeam, were, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He could not have so mercifully and lovingly interceded for his executioners if such thoughts of affectionate devotion had not been the mainspring of all his life of unselfish service. The ideas, motives, and longings of a lifetime are openly revealed in a crisis. After the Master was hoisted on the cross, the captain nailed the title up above his head, and it read in 3 languages, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The Jews were infuriated by this believed insult, but Pilate was chafed by their disrespectful manner. He felt he had been intimidated and humiliated, and he took this method of obtaining petty revenge. He could have written, "Jesus a rebel," but he well knew how these Jerusalem Jews detested the very name of Nazareth, and he was determined thus to humiliate them. He knew that they would also be cut to the very quick by seeing this executed Galilean called the King of the Jews. Many of the Jewish leaders, when they learned how Pilate had sought to deride them by placing this inscription on the cross of Jesus, hastened out to Golgotha, but they dared not attempt to remove it, since the Roman soldiers were standing on guard. Not being able to remove the title, these leaders mingled with the crowd and did their utmost to incite derision and ridicule, lest any give serious regard to the inscription. The Apostle John, with Mary, the mother of Jesus, Ruth, and Jude, arrived on the scene just after Jesus had been hoisted to his position on the cross, and just as the captain was nailing the title above the Master's head. John was the only one of the 11 apostles to witness the crucifixion, and even he was not present all of the time, since he ran into Jerusalem to bring back his mother and her friends soon after he had brought Jesus' mother to the scene. As Jesus saw his mother, with John and his brother and sister, he smiled but said nothing. Meanwhile, the 4 soldiers assigned to the Master's crucifixion, as was the custom, had divided his clothes among them, one taking the sandals, one the turban, one the girdle, and the 4th the cloak. This left the tunic, or seamless vestment running down to near the knees, to be cut up into 4 pieces. But when the soldiers saw what an unusual garment it was, they decided to cast lots for it. Jesus looked down on them while they divided his garments, and the thoughtless crowd jeered at him. It was well that the Roman soldiers took possession of the Master's clothing. Otherwise, if his followers had gained possession of these garments, they would have been tempted to resort to superstitious relic worship. The Master desired that his followers should have nothing material to associate with his life on earth. He wanted to leave mankind only the memory of a human life dedicated to the high spiritual ideal of being consecrated to doing the Father's will. 3. Those who saw the crucifixion. At about 9:30 this Friday morning, Jesus was hung upon the cross. Before 11 o'clock, upward of 1,000 persons had assembled to witness the spectacle of the crucifixion of the Son of Man. Throughout these dreadful hours, the unseen hosts of a universe stood in silence while they gazed upon this extraordinary phenomenon of the Creator as he was dying the death of the creature, even the most ignoble death of a condemned criminal. Standing near the cross at one time or another during the crucifixion were Mary, Ruth, Jude, John, Salome, John's mother, and a group of earnest women believers including Mary, the wife of Clopas, the sister of Jesus' mother, Mary Magdalene, and Rebecca, one time of Sepphoris. These and other friends of Jesus held their peace while they witnessed his great patience and fortitude and gazed upon his intense sufferings. Many who passed by wagged their heads and, railing at him, said, "You who would destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, why do you not come down from your cross?" In like manner some of the rulers of the Jews mocked him, saying, "He saved others, but himself he cannot save." Others said, "If you are the King of the Jews, come down from the cross, and we will believe in you." And later on they mocked him the more, saying, "He trusted in God to deliver him. He even claimed to be the Son of God. Look at him now, crucified between 2 thieves." Even the 2 thieves also railed at him, and cast reproach upon him. Inasmuch as Jesus would make no reply to their taunts, and since it was nearing noontime of this special preparation day, by 11:30 most of the jesting and jeering crowd had gone its way. Less than 50 persons remained on the scene. The soldiers now prepared to eat lunch and drink their cheap, sour wine as they settled down for the long death watch. As they partook of their wine, they derisively offered a toast to Jesus, saying, "Hail and good fortune to the King of the Jews." And they were astonished at the Master's tolerant regard of their ridicule and mocking. When Jesus saw them eat and drink, he looked down upon them and said, "I thirst." When the captain of the guard heard Jesus say, "I thirst," he took some of the wine from his bottle, and, putting the saturated sponge stopper upon the end of a javelin, raised it to Jesus so that he could moisten his parched lips. Jesus had purposed to live without resort to his supernatural power, and he likewise elected to die as an ordinary mortal upon the cross. He had lived as a man, and he would die as a man, doing the Father's will. 4. The Thief on the Cross. One of the brigands railed at Jesus, saying, "If you are the Son of God, why do you not save yourself and us?" But when he had reproached Jesus, the other thief, who had many times heard the Master teach, said, "Do you have no fear even of God? Do you not see that we are suffering justly for our deeds, but that this man suffers unjustly? Better that we should seek forgiveness for our sins and salvation for our souls." When Jesus heard the thief say this, he turned his face toward him and smiled approvingly. When the malefactor saw the face of Jesus turned toward him, he mustered up his courage, fanned the flickering flame of his faith, and said, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And then Jesus said, "Verily, verily I say to you today, you shall sometime be with me in paradise." The Master had time amidst the pangs of mortal death to listen to the faith confession of the believing brigand. When this thief reached out for salvation, he found deliverance. Many times before this, he had been constrained to believe in Jesus, but only in these last hours of consciousness did he turn with a whole heart toward the Master's teaching. When he saw the manner in which Jesus faced death upon the cross, this thief could no longer resist the conviction that this Son of Man was indeed the Son of God. During this episode of the conversion and reception of the thief into the kingdom by Jesus, the Apostle John was absent, having gone into the city to bring his mother and her friends to the scene of the crucifixion. Luke subsequently heard this story from the converted Roman captain of the guard. The Apostle John told about the crucifixion as he remembered the event 2/3 of